What is up, guys? Thanks for joining me again on my YouTube channel. If you've been following along with the project that we're making, you're probably thinking, what the heck? Where are the snare drums? When is he going to add snare drums to the project? So today I'm going to be looking at how to effectively use snare drums in your Psytrance track and how to mix them so they don't clash with the other elements that are in your track currently. So I figured I just want to give you guys a little bit of background as to the conundrum that most of the time people are facing when looking at trying to sort of incorporate snares into the track. And the problem is that snare drums generally contain a large amount of transients. When you layer them over the kick, which is essentially just a transient sound, you either lose the transient effect of the snare or it kind of muddies up the transient effect of the kick. So the way I combat that is to remove the transients from the snare itself, and you're just left with the sort of psh sound of the snare drum as opposed to the entire, the transient, the white noise, tail, and everything like that. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of ways of going about that. And I'm going to show you guys first which one I feel is the most effective, and you guys can choose from there. So first thing I'm going to do, let's open up the project. So first thing I want to do is I want to find a suitable snare drum sound. So I guess it kind of works, it can kind of work on anything, so it doesn't really matter what type of snare sound you're looking for, but you generally want to find one that's got a lot of white noise content, something that's not too clicky, something that sounds very sort of like a slap, like psh kind of sound. Cool, so this is a good example. It's got quite a lot of transient in it, so it's going to kind of show you guys the effect of the sound I'm talking about a lot better. So first things first, what I want to do is I just want to create a duplicate of it so that I've got the original sound. I can always go back if I've kind of feel like I've gone a little bit too heavy on the processing or something like that. I can always dial it back and start again from the original. I don't have to go back to my sample library and try to find the sound again. So there's a bit of a click on the end of the sample, so I just want to create my own fade out like this. Cool, so what I like to do is I like to use a gate effect, which is similar to a compressor but kind of works the other way around. So the idea is you want to use the attack setting of the gate to sort of truncate the amount of transient that is applied on the snare itself. What we want to do is we would just want to play through the sound. It's probably easier to solo it as well. And then we're going to adjust this threshold till we're just hearing the click itself of the sound. So now we've isolated just the transient of the snare. So it's going to be a lot easier to hear the effect of what this attack parameter is doing to the sound because we only have the transient that we're listening to. So the idea now is we want to adjust the attack parameter until we've got the desired effect of transient that we want on our snare drum. So let's play through and adjust and listen to what the effect is that's being applied. So you want to shift your attack parameter until you're hearing no more transient. And then what we can do is we can reduce our threshold back down again to bring the rest of the sound back in. Cool, so now we've got basically just the body and tail of the snare drum without the transients. So it's going to make it a lot easier to mix it on top of a kick drum because you no longer have to deal with this massive peak in audio. So the kick is going to be taking up that space in the mix, and the snare is going to be sort of played just after that. The one main issue that I have when sort of applying this process is it kind of applies a little bit of a latency. Obviously, because what's happening now is that transient is now completely removed, and a way to combat this is you can actually just render it out and chop it off and move it backwards. But first thing I want to do is I actually want to apply an EQ before I render it out and stuff. So let's remove the solo and then just apply EQ until we can sort of hear it starting to fit better in the mix of the track. Cool, so now we can actually just pick one of these guys, render it out. Now we can zoom right in, and you'll see what I was talking about with the bit of sort of gap before the actual audio starts playing. So what we can do is we can actually just drag this back a little bit and cut it, just like this. Maybe give it a couple of milliseconds of fade in, maybe just one, and then also just cut the tail, because again I forgot to remove the tail when I was rendering. We'll only need it about this size. So now once we've got our sort of sample done and dusted, we can actually just right click and click on bounce. And that kind of solidifies our sample as is. And then we can go and arrange it back to the sort of the grid that we were working with. So now we can go ahead and actually remove this over here, resequence these as we had them. So it's probably easier to actually put these into a part and then just Alt Shift, so that if you do want to edit them later, it's going to apply the edit across the table. So obviously, because the EQ that I applied before bouncing it was just a sort of quick reference, sometimes I find I'll have to go back and just apply a little bit more cut, because once I start listening to it with the rest of the elements in the track, and once it's kind of layered exactly over the kick, things start to change a little bit. So it's always good to just go back to the EQ and just make sure all the lows are cut out and the snare is sitting in exactly the sort of right frequency space that you want it to be sitting in. And it's sounding pretty decent now. Let's just have a quick reference again. And now, because we left the sort of original sample there, when we're creating our sort of offbeat snares, we don't necessarily have to take the transients out, because there's not going to be any kicks there for them to kind of get problematic with. So we can start arranging our offbeat snares now on a separate track, but you know, with the grid that we're working with here. Let's have a listen to what I'm talking about. So with the offbeat snares, I like to pan them. Sometimes I'll have two channels, one panned left, one panned right. Sometimes I'll just have one panned slightly right or slightly left. For the sort of ease of this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it one channel panned slightly. But you can kind of get the idea. And if you guys want to vary it a bit, create a second channel, have some of the samples playing on one, some of the samples playing on another.
Was going on.
So that's one of the few ways I go about removing the transients from my snare so that they mix better with my kick drums. I'll be going through a couple of other techniques in a follow-up video, so hopefully you guys will stick around to check that one out. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and if you haven't yet, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, head on over to my Patreon page if you want to support what I do. See you guys next time.